Okay, let's talk about tariffs. Now, of course, this week, the US President Donald Trump has imposed a lot of tariffs on many countries across the world, including some US allies. Now, undoubtedly, this is going to have a dramatic and a very negative effect on the world economy. So the question is, why? Why would Donald Trump do this? Now, first of all, a huge disclaimer. I'm absolutely not an economist, so if you hear me say something crazy, that's why. But I believe that by using common sense, we can come to a general understanding of what's going on here. So why is Donald Trump doing this? Now, first of all, the short answer, or maybe not the short answer, but let's say the overarching answer is that I believe that the United States is an empire in decline. Now, what we've learned is that throughout history, empires rose and empires fell. And what they've all had in common is that when they fell, they didn't go quietly. So like someone who's drowning, they all went kicking and screaming with a lot of noise, a lot of chaos, mayhem, and a lot of violence. Now, what the United States is exhibiting at the moment is basically all the symptoms of an empire in decline. So we're seeing a lot of turmoil across the world, which I believe can be contributed directly or indirectly to exactly that process. So there's been a lot of tension between the United States and Russia. There's a war going on in Ukraine. There's an ongoing genocide in Gaza. The United States is bombing Yemen. There's talk of war with Iran, and of course there's also a lot of tension between the United States and China. The United States seems to be in some kind of panic mode, and again I believe that all of this is directly or indirectly an effect of exactly that. And by the way, also another symptom of the state the United States is in is Donald Trump. Donald Trump being the president of the United States is a very clear indication of where the United States is at. But anyway, I believe that is the overarching reason why Donald Trump imposed all these tariffs. The United States is an empire in decline. Now let's zoom in on the tariffs in and of itself. What is the idea behind them? Now, the United States is very much a consumer market, which of course is fine if you have a lot of money to spend. You can also translate that to your own personal life. If you have a lot of money to spend, you can choose to outsource a lot of activities that otherwise you would be doing yourself. So for example, if you have a lot of money, then you can choose to outsource doing the dishes by either buying a dishwasher or maybe to hire someone to do the dishes for you. I mean, you have the money, so why not, right? Now, the problem is that the US economy is not doing very well at all. It seems to be drowning in debt, inflation is a huge problem, and on top of that, it's facing a very strong competition from especially China, of course. And the mentality of the US government seems to be such that it cannot accept losing the #1 position. So something needs to happen or the US economy is probably going to collapse. So now, what are tariffs supposed to do? Well, the basic idea behind them is this. Let's say you go into a store and you see two competing products. They're exactly as good, they have the same quality, it's just that one costs $100, the other one costs $105. Which one are you gonna pick? Of course, the one that costs $100. It's cheaper. The thing is that the one that costs $100 is made in China, the other one that costs $105 is made domestically in the United States. So for some reason, the American producer was not able to compete price-wise with the one from China. Now let's say that the US government will impose a 10% tariff on these particular goods from China. That means that this product from China for the US consumer will no longer cost $100 but will now cost $110. The other one that is made domestically will still be $105. So now which one would you pick? Of course, the one that is $105. So the theory is that by imposing tariffs, it would incentivize American consumers to more often choose American-made products over products made elsewhere. And that, of course, comes with a lot of potential benefits. So, for example, it should increase the demand for American-made products, which of course would incentivize producers to to produce more. That would, of course, be good for job opportunities. It would also give the United States more control over these products. So, for example, where they are made, how they are made, etc., etc. So again, theoretically, it would come with a lot of potential benefits. However, the question is, will it work? Because by using tariffs this way, the United States is absolutely taking some risks and inevitably it's going to run into some challenges. Let me give you a few examples. Now, first of all, imposing tariffs almost by definition makes life more expensive for the American consumer. Let's go back to the example I just gave with the two products. So before the tariffs, the cheapest one was $100. After the tariffs, the cheapest one was $105. So in a way, that already is an increase in price. And also, if the price of the competitor is no longer $100, but now $110, and yours is $105, what would keep that American producer, that American manufacturer, from increasing their price to, let's say, $108 or $109? I mean, it's still cheaper than the competition. So, it would incentivize American producers to increase their prices. Now, another problem that the US might run into is about labor costs. So, in many countries around the world, the wages in general are lower than in the United States. That is exactly why many American companies and also European companies, for example, outsource a lot of production activities to these so-called low-wage countries. Now, if you want to bring back manufacturing to the United States, then inevitably production costs, and with that, of course, consumer prices are gonna go up. So all in all of this is not at all good for the American consumer, and it has a very negative effect on inflation, certainly in the short term. So how are you gonna deal with that? Now, another disadvantage to tariffs is this. So on a level playing field, I believe that competition drives innovation. So in order to beat the competition, you somehow need to create a better product, right? Now, if the government blocks out the competition by imposing tariffs on their products, then that will also, to some degree, take away the incentive to innovate. Now let me give you an example. So China at the moment is dominating the EV market. So they're making the best electronic vehicles and they're selling it for very affordable prices. Now, American car manufacturers cannot compete with that. Now, by imposing a lot of tariffs on Chinese EVs, yes, American consumers are probably going to stop buying Chinese EVs. But now American car manufacturers are no longer incentivized to make their cars better or at least equally as good as Chinese EVs. And that, of course, can cause American industries, and in this case the car industry, to fall behind to, for example, China, because they're no longer incentivized, because American consumers are gonna buy American cars anyway. They have no other choice. Now, and then of course there's also this. So these plans, these tariffs, are being presented by Donald Trump and his team as if the United States is still the only superpower in the world and all other countries will have to bow down to the will of the United States. So if the United States imposes tariffs on companies in your country, then that's it. There's nothing you can do. Well, unfortunately for the US, those days are over. Of course, some of these countries and some economic blocs, like for example the EU, can also impose tariffs on you. And sure, if the US imposes tariffs on some products from your country, the economy of your country is probably going to take a hit. But your country can also impose tariffs on the United States, and that might also hurt the US economy. And if you consider that the US represents only about 4% of the world population, it seems to me like it's a pretty big gamble that Donald Trump is taking. Now, and then you also need to consider that the United States has lost a lot of goodwill in the world. And that is first of all because the United States for decades now has exhibited a very imperialistic kind of behavior. So they've been pressuring countries around the world to do whatever the United States wants, either forcefully or covertly. They've been using economic sanctions, they've weaponized the US dollar, and they even weaponized the SWIFT banking system. And many countries around the world are fed up with this. And that is exactly how BRICS came into existence. BRICS is there to protect member states from the imperialistic pressure from the United States. But now on top of all of that, the United States is imposing all of these tariffs. I believe that that will scare a lot of countries away from ever doing business with the United States again. They will take their business elsewhere, just like many countries have already done. Now that, of course, is very bad for the US economy. But anyway, all in all, on the one hand, it seems like a pretty good idea, reindustrializing the United States. On the other hand, using tariffs to do that comes with a lot of challenges. But will it be successful? Well, I believe that no one really knows exactly what is going to happen. I mean, you can be the best economist, no one knows. Personally, I'm not very optimistic about this for the United States, but of course also I don't know. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. But what do you think? Do you think this is the right move? This is a smart move by Donald Trump? Or do you think this is going to end in a total disaster? Let me know what you think, okay? Thanks for watching.